Good afternoon. My name is Emily Falvey. I'm the Director-Curator of the Owens Art Gallery. It is my sincere pleasure to welcome you all to the second talk in this year's Visiting Artist Speaker Series, which is organized jointly by the Pierre Lassonde School of Fine Arts and the Owens Art Gallery. This program features contemporary, Canadian, and international artists at various stages of their careers and allows students and community members to engage with a wider range of artistic practices. Today's talk was also made possible thanks to a special partnership with Philosophy, Politics, and Economics, an interdisciplinary program at Mount Allison that gives students insight into the meaning of citizenship, how government works, the nature of justice, and the outcomes of economic systems and policies. With any program that involves travel and sharing stories, it is especially important to remember that the Mi'kmaq people are these lands' first storytellers. I would like to acknowledge that Mount Allison University is located within the traditional territory of Mi'kma'ki, the unceded ancestral homelands of the Mi'kmaq. Our relationship and our privilege to live on this territory was agreed upon in the Peace and Friendship Treaties of 1725 to 1752. Because of this treaty relationship, it is to be acknowledged that we are all treaty people, and we have a responsibility to respect this territory. I also wish to pay my personal respects to all Mi'kmaq elders and ancestors, and to extend that respect to any Indigenous people here today. I recognize your continued connection to the lands and waters of this place, and I acknowledge that your sovereignty was never ceded. We are incredibly fortunate to have artist Manuel Mathieu with us today to speak about his artistic practice and the work on display in his solo touring exhibition, World Discovered Under Other Skies, which was curated by Amin Al-Sadin and organized by the Power Plant Contemporary Art Gallery in Toronto. This exhibition opens at the Owens on Friday at 7 p.m. and it will be on view until December 10th. The opening on Friday is a public event and all are welcome. I also want to mention that Manuel will be leading an affinity space conversation for members of the Black Caucus tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. For more information or to register, please visit the Owens website, owensartgallery.com. Manuel Mathieu is a multidisciplinary artist working with painting, ceramics, film, and installation. His interests are partially informed by his upbringing in Haiti, just after the fall of the Duvalier dictatorship, and his experience emigrating to Montreal at the age of 19. In his art, he investigates themes of historical violence, erasure, resilience, and cultural approaches to physicality, nature, and spiritual legacy, while also considering how the boundaries between the past and present, or the personal and political, are often blurred. Sharing recollections that depict everyday scenes, Manuel blends into his canvases an interrogation of the complex history of his familial homeland. By unearthing the traumas of state violence, he addresses issues that remain as urgent today as they have throughout Haitian history. Manuel obtained an MFA degree from Goldsmiths University of London. Recent solo exhibitions have been held at the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts, the Power Plant in Toronto, and the Longlati Foundation in Beijing. He recently opened Rising from the Ashes, a touring exhibition at the K11 Art Foundation, Shanghai, Wuhan, and Shenyang. The Museum of Contemporary Art North Miami and the Max Ernst Museum in Brühl, Germany will present exhibitions by Manuel in 2024 and 2025. He was one of the artists recognized by the 2020 Sobey Art Award, and he received the Best Short Film Award at the 2023 Festival International des Films sur l'Art. Please welcome Manuel Mathieu.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. I will start this talk with a little section from a writer that I like, Chris Abani, that you can see here. So Chris Abani is a writer that I really like, and he said a few things. I invite you to have a look at this presentation on TED. It's on humanity. And there's a part that I find really interesting, especially for this space, in this context that we're in, talking about art and artists, because I can see a lot of artists here today. So there it is.
The Igbo used to say that they built their own gods. They would come together as a community and they would express a wish. And their wish would then be brought to a priest who would find a ritual object, and the appropriate sacrifices would be made, and a shrine would be built for the god. But if the god became unruly and began to ask for human sacrifice, the Igbos would destroy the god. They would knock down the shrine, and they would stop saying the god's name. This is how they came to reclaim their humanity. Every day, all of us here, we're building gods that have gone rampant. And it's time we started knocking them down and forgetting their names.
There you go. This process, what he described, for me talks about art, you know, because we get together, the idea of the process of making art for me is very close to that, to the idea of making a wish, you know, is to hope for something, is to put our hopes into something, into objects who become relics of our imagination, of our intimacy. Okay, so let me start. So that was Bani, was talking about his perspective on humanity, and from what I understand also, how we can create a sense of spirituality through objects, which I think that we're actually doing when we're making art. This is, I don't know how much time I have, so we're gonna be here until 9 p.m., so I hope you had lunch and supper. No, I'm joking. There's a lot to say. When I had this conversation, I didn't know exactly how to approach it. I knew there was going to be students in the place, so I'm going to try to talk about a little bit of my journey, a little bit of my process, a little bit of how certain work mixed with each other to create a new practice, a sculpture practice, for example, which is fairly new to me. So, just so you know, I grew up in Haiti. I left, I was 19. Emily said that. This is a picture in my room, and this was a radiography of I hit my head, and I had a radiography, and I put it in my room. And my room was a whole installation. That was the first artwork I can say that I did. And right after that, well, the reason why I got into that is because of this man here. It was called Mario Benjamin. He's the cousin of my father. He's a Haitian artist. I mean, good friend of mine, still a good friend of mine. And Mario is an amazing creator. And when I was younger, I met him, and he started giving me books and catalogs. I was about 15 years old. And through the catalogs and the books that he gave me, I fell in love with art. And I can't say at that time I was an artist, because it didn't actually matter to me what I was. What mattered to me is that I was interested when I was reading and discovering those artists. I understood they lived from what they had in their souls. And for me at that point, that was very liberating, to the idea that I could survive from something that I carry in me, and that this thing is infinite. So at 15 years old, I decided this is it for me. I'm gonna do these things, and to be honest, I didn't start it as a painter. He was a painter, so obviously I want to emulate him. So I did some terrible paintings, but in parallel, I was also working with a photographer, and I did a lot of darkroom, actually. This is some of my early pictures that I developed myself. I don't share a lot of that part of my practice, but I know some students, when you first start university, you touch a lot of things. But this was before I actually went to Canada to study. I was in Haiti, and I was working with Roberto Stevenson, who's a photographer, Italian, Haitian. And with Roberto, I did a lot of black room, actually. So I took pictures, and we worked together in the dark room. This is a mountain of Canapé Vert, if you know Port-au-Prince. So this is basically what it is, where it is. I kept my photography practice until university. This is a picture of me going to Montreal, because when I moved to Canada, I lived in Blainville at my grandmother's house. And there was a bus you needed to take that took 45 minutes to get to a station, and then take another train to get to the university. So this is one of the pictures that I took while going there, and that I also developed. And like a lot of students at the time, you take pictures and images of your family. I've met I met 3 students today, and I related. They talked a lot about how in their practice they use their family, which is your first tool, your first kind of connection to reality. So this is a picture of my sister, also in a dark room, that I use a technique of superposition of images. It's Fedora. I've painted her many, many times, and this was my first encounter, if you want, with combination of images and nature. So I don't think there's nothing wrong about using your family as a first tool to process or kind of either emotions or apparition that could happen whether in your painting or in your drawing. I think it's an entry point to your emotions, basically. After my study at UQAM, I was in Montreal. I realized very early that I didn't necessarily want to stay in Montreal because I didn't feel like this is where I belong, basically. I had a lot of fun, I met a lot of interesting people, but I felt like I wanted to actually further my purpose, basically. And when I went to study at Goldsmiths in London, I had interesting encounters and moments when I was there. I actually also had a big accident that's changed. I don't want to say change my practice, but it really forces me to ask certain important questions in my work. And I know there's artists here, and there's a question I asked myself. I was supposed to make my graduating show on a book that's called Story of the Eye from George Bataille. And after the accident, I asked myself, if this was my last show, would it actually be about Story of the Eye? And obviously, the question was no. So I think what it underlines is the sense of urgency. I think it's important to work as an artist with that sense of urgency. Never to forget what is necessary for you to do, and not what you're kind of either convinced to do or drawn to do. So when that happened, I was recovering. I had a big concussion. I broke my face and my jaw and other parts, and I had to start, seeing again and thinking about again. And during that time, my grandmother was dying from cancer at the time, and I felt like there was a transition of energy that was happening. She died, and but during that time, when I was, with myself and asking myself questions, I started wondering, why was I exposed to so much violence growing up in Haiti? And these questions came up. And my grandfather also, my grandmother was dying. My grandfather, her ex-husband, was a colonel under the dictatorship of Haiti. And on the side of my father, many family members on the side of my father were killed. So, and Haiti is big and it's small at the same time. So it's, to be at the crossroad of that and to start, wondering. I was born in '86, and it was the end of the dictatorship. So basically I was born, this generation, I like to say, was born at the end of the dictatorship. So we're the first adults coming out of this era. Being in London, we need to contextualize things. The dictatorship happened to preserve capitalism, to keep communism from entering in Haiti. So the United States facilitates this dictatorship, like many dictatorships at the time, And it's called Cold War for certain countries, but it's very, very hot in others, you know, like in Haiti. So basically what happened in many of those countries was permanent damages, because there's lives that was lost, travels, and basically shaped the future of many nations. And it's basically of collateral of the system that we're in today. Whether we like it or not, it's just what it is. So that being said, being in London, I felt, being the heart of the system, if I can put it like that, I felt I could only link to that and actually do a show that's talking about the dictatorship, because there's a direct connection between the system that we're in right now, the economical system that we're in right now, and in that dictatorship. So I took that picture as an image because the guy on the right is Jacques-Stéphane Alexis, who's a Haitian writer, was killed by the dictatorship, by Duvalier, let's put a name on it. And he was afraid that he was coming with some communist ideas, and it was actually true. You know, that was a picture of him meeting with Mao. And I did a painting of that that's called A Meeting, where I kind of conceptually trying to understand how both of these figures or personas could actually meet visually. So that's kind of a conceptual exercise. And when I approach a subject, especially like the dictatorship, I wasn't interested in trying to paint violence, you know, or blood, or kind of, I did paint in a few executions, but the idea was to talk about the mechanism and how this system or this kind of dictatorship created certain patterns and certain ideas and created certain people. And one of them is the wife of Duvalier, who's alive today. Her name is Michelle Bennett. And that's the day of her wedding with Jean-Claude, which is the son of François. And I think this image symbolized a lot, because while the country was suffering and overcoming the situation, the violent context, she was having a very luxurious wedding. And I also painted her to symbolize that luxurious reality in context. And I think, you know, this segment is called the use of a language, because I was talking to some students today, and, you know, I painted a lot of paintings before understanding that I could use this thing as a way to kind of express certain ideas or concerns or concepts. And it doesn't make the job easier. You know, it's not because you decide to use it as a tool or as a kind of like language that it makes the job easier. It's actually opens the doors for possibilities and also questions the limits of what you can do or what you want to do with the medium. So yeah, so I painted Michelle. I also painted this execution, the execution of Numa, the person on the left that you can see here. Numa, he was part of the Young Haiti group, which is a group of young Haitians that was living outside of the country, who came into the country to actually try to fight the dictatorship. And unfortunately, they were all killed, and that's kind of one of the executions where they kind of killed them publicly just to make a statement. And I'm saying that, and you know, it's important to underline that if you had told me when I was doing that 5 years prior to that, I would be working on something like that, I would not have never thought, you know. But I think it's important to follow your intuition, and also understanding more and more the world and the weight of the kind of world that we live in, and be aware of what we're actually experiencing. So I really loved Numa because of his position. I felt like there was, because and there's also a transition that happened in the process because when you look at images, historical images, and you decide to paint them, you know, the question remains what it is that you're trying to paint. You know, is it you're trying to paint something in the concept of what happened, or like a moment, or you're trying to paint the person, you know, how much of what you're painting stays in the symbolic, in the symbol of what it is. You know, I think, and these are one of the approaches that I had in the past, and in the way that I decided to use paint. And it's not the only one. I've worked on the dictatorship for about 3 years, and then after that, and you're gonna see some work in the show. You're gonna see some work in the show. You're gonna see some work that I did for the show in relation also to the dictatorship, and certain work that I did after that in relation to some concerns I had in relation to the work, basically. So after that, I felt like I didn't want to stick to the limits of history, and I started working with images that I found. This is a picture I took in Jacmel when I was visiting some years ago, and I really liked the position of the figure. For me, it's a lot about the composition already in the picture. How can I use that image to create either an atmosphere or question the limits of the figure in the context that they're in. And I've worked, I'm not going to be able to show you everything, but I've worked on the aura of artworks. I've worked on the accident that I had. I worked on it 3 years after. I've worked on many ways of understanding how apparition can serve as a way to be present in the world. So, for example, I took that picture and I worked on that, and for me it was an exercise of understanding how you can stretch a medium and actually use it to create new forms of seeing reality and of being present also in reality. This is all, and I also use images, references that I like. For example, this is a picture from Christine Garcia. This is from a festival in Haiti. And in my culture, in voodoo, there's some references sometimes about the body and the animal, and then the combination of both. And I felt like this could be interesting for me to be used as a trampoline to actually paint and transform, blur the line between the figure and actually the persona. So, and as you can see, there's some elements that points to those figures, and also how I can blur the line in what you see and what you want to see and what you cannot see. And as you notice in all those images, I'm not only closing myself into my sense of identity. I think as a free young black man, if I can put it like that, I want to be able to decide when I enter in and out of my identity. This is another picture from the same event. And this is a painting that I did in Germany when I was doing a residency, and I started using fabric. That's one of the work where fabric started being present, and I started burning in and putting ink, and it started for me with this idea that this idea of desire, actually, that could be something. And it's strange how it works, because it starts with that concept, right? It's like you want to make a concept and you're working around desire, and then 3 years after you realize it wasn't about desire, and it's fine. But at the time, I felt like because of the organicity of the fabric, and you're gonna see how it works. It's actually that's what it created. And I worked around certain connections with Haiti, but I also bring some personal elements in the work. For example, this is a picture of me after the accident, and I also use that as a work and in my to use it as an inspiration. And this one is called The Ritual, and I think it's the reason I call it The Ritual is in reference to the fact that when your light is dimming, hopefully there's people around you to cater it and to make sure that it doesn't fade away. And for me, that's a ritual, for example. And so that's why, for example, this painting is called A Ritual. And in the process of experiencing that accident, I also dealt with some concept like solitude, for example, the name of that painting here, because nobody knows. I mean, break every bone in your body, but don't hit the head. You know, nobody knows what's going on in the brain. Nobody knows. No matter how good a doctor you are, when it gets to the brain, everybody's like, well, everybody talks in percentage. You know, it's like, well, 20%, 40%. So because of the unknown, you spend a lot of time alone. You know, because nobody actually have answers, so you actually kind of build a kind of cocoon to find answers, basically. So it's also how conceptually I was approaching these things, you know. How do you paint solitude, if you were to paint solitude? How do you paint selfishness, if you were to paint selfishness? How do you paint amnesia, if you were to paint amnesia? So this is again back to that idea of using the language, is how do you create a form of elasticity in the way you represent reality in an intimate way and in ways that matters to you, you know, how it communicates with you. And it goes from like making paintings, a painting like that, which is basically, and this is called amnesia, it's in reference to the memory, you know. I had to sit down and wonder, what is a memory? What is memory actually? It's information, but is it like continued information? What happens when you don't have this information anymore, or there's parts of it? You know, how do you visually create this kind of experience? And in that same perspective of questioning the ways of apparition, I started pushing also my understanding of apparition. For example, this painting of me and my grandmother. This painting is called Rempart. Well, this painting is called Rempart. And this painting actually, I was thinking about Zygmunt Bauman, who's a sociologist, was talking about liquid love and liquid society. And also, I don't know if you know this game, it's called Tomatrop. You know, this idea of, you know, the bird in the cage and then the two images are flicking. And I started wondering, as subjects in the world we're in right now, if we were to flick extremely fast, what would be the limits of our bodies and the limits of our environment, you know? And how do we actually create, how can we use that to expand the way that image appears? So this idea that me and my grandma were separate beings, and that in this picture painting we could become inside of each other, I think is really intriguing, and not just from the perspective of two people, but it could also be a chair and a person. It could also be concepts, you know, how do you mix certain concepts and create a visual experience? This is my grandmother in her garden. So this is again a reference to how I use painting. She wouldn't be happy. She was in her sleeping gown. So if she was alive, she would just kill me, because you don't put a picture of me in a sleeping gown, all right? But it's fine. I think she would appreciate. She would appreciate to have it, especially in the context and how it was used. This painting was acquired by the Museum of Fine Arts in Montreal, and when they acquired it, I became the first Black Haitian Canadian to enter the collection. And I used that the money they gave me to start a fund, initiate a fund that I name after her. And this fund is for underrepresented artists in the collection. So I'm telling you that because it's important to also understand that we can be artists, but we're also citizens, and that we can use our position to make a real difference and impact people. The fund I've had acquired 4 artists so far, and we're planning to keep on entering new names and new stories within the museum door. So I will talk a little bit about my influences, all right? And connecting the dots, there's an artist that had a huge impact on me, pretty late actually. His name is Georges Lyoto. He's a Haitian artist. I really love that metal cut image because it's very simple, symbolic, but it says everything, you know? And the fact that she, if we can call her like that, is smiling, giving birth, I think it says it all about the humor of the artist and the simplicity, or the kind of, for me, there's like a glitch in the way that he creates a strong metaphor with very simple lines. I was very much impressed by that, and by him and this other artist, American artist, I forgot his name for now, but Bill Taylor, I can't remember. Trailer, there we go. You can see there some references, right? It's like the lines, and I was like, I was studying these guys because I spend trying to find new artists every once in a while, or artists, because these guys are certainly not new. And I kind of study them, and trying to understand how I can use lines in my work to create strong metaphors. That's what gave birth to the body of work that you're going to see at the museum eventually tomorrow, is how I use ceramics, which is very different than the metal because they have different temporalities. You know, to do the ceramic, there's like, I don't know, you have to shape it, you have to dry it, you have to pre-cook and then cook and glaze, and then, you know, that's not the real process for those who do ceramics. It's just 2 cookings, not 3, or it could be 1, depend what kind of work you want to do. But it's a very long, it's a longer process than the metal cutting. And I think for me to kind of mix those 2 legacies and trying to do something, you know, I don't want to say unique, but actually to bring these 2 languages and create these enforcing bridges are very important to me. And it actually expands the possibilities in both worlds, you know. So these are all works that you'll have the opportunity to see in the show. It's like a spoiler. Those who didn't come don't have it, which is fine. But that gives you an idea of a little bit of my journey, how I got into doing this. And also, the one on the right, the one that you're seeing now is called Fragmented Archipelago. But that's, for example, how, you know, I started painting, and then I started visually trying to create kind of lines and use certain ways to mix these legacies. And it wasn't like, I think it's important, you know, there's students here, it's important to learn in the process of doing, and not always trying to, you know, I wasn't obsessing about, I'm mixing these 2 legacies and it has to be mixed up, you know, I have to do it. It's not about that. I was just trying to find something, and it so happens that there was an overlap, and I was very happy to actually touch them and do something that lasts. And right after that, I started making sculpture. So right now we're literally witnessing the evolution from the painting to the ceramics into sculptures. These objects slowly started coming out of their shapes, and that's how I actually started sculpting. And right now I have a good amount of sculptures, and I started mixing also with the sculptures. This is a silicone with dust, with wood. This is kind of fabric, mixing with ceramic. And like before, I was interested in the fabric, and these kind of, the burnt fabric I showed you with the picture of the woman initiated also a new avenue of using the fabric and of thinking about it as painting. So I started moving. In the residency, it wasn't a castle. In the back, there was a big garden. So I actually had the opportunity to start playing and playing with soil and burn, and sometimes the facility also helps you to expand your thoughts and ideas. So this body is called Frontier, and slowly you're going to see how these fabrics, with the use of the ceramic, became a big component in my installation practice, which is something that I never saw coming, but slowly you can see how they kind of were to work together in the space. For example, that's an installation where I use the fabric, but later on I'm going to show you an installation that's called Transient, where I actually used a line of fabric in the space, and on the floor there was actually ceramic balls, and my mother's was like, they looked like tears or drops coming out of the fabric, and I think it's an interesting perspective, because it's impossible, because of how I did the ceramics, impossible that they had the same temporality, but I like the dynamic, the kind of jump that she could do in her brain, that, it could just fall down, meaning that maybe the fabric were holding something that I wasn't aware of, and that created this kind of transformation. So that gets us to a movie. I'm going to show you a short film of 11 minutes, so it's not very long, but it's work I did last year, and this work embodies, to a certain point, my practice, my vision. It's a movie that I directed, I did the artistic direction, and I produced, and that will be shown at the New Orleans Film Festival next month. So the movie is called Pendulum.
Mais pour qui ça nous pas qu'à liberté?
Voila. So this is my did good, right under an hour. I suppose you have questions. If not, then it's a wrap. But I'm very much welcome to have your questions right now. No, I mean, yeah, I mean, I do. You'll see in the show, there's really small ones and there's really big ones. And to be fair, when I started, I couldn't afford to do big paintings at all, you know. And even when I started doing big paintings, then I couldn't afford to store them, so I had to roll them, you know. But I've always been drawn to do both, you know. And to this day, I mean, in the studio, I have a bigger studio now, and I still do smaller works and bigger works. There's no really preferences, you know. Sometimes depend on the subject or the space that I have. Also, I try to work with the space that I have usually. Are you a painter? Yeah. Ah. Yeah, the challenges of a small and a big painting, right? Where's home? Terminal 5? No, I'm joking. It's like a joke and not a joke. It's in my head, I guess, you know, because, you know, I paint, still paint a lot, and I kind of need a studio for that, but because I'm writing movies now, and I'm writing, and I'm kind of like, I'm also making perfumes. So basically, it's a place and it's not a place at the same time, you know. It's a place where I can create, you know, because it's a practice that accompanies me and that completes me at the same time. So I think where I have my studio is in Montreal right now, but then tonight I might write something. So my hotel room is going to be my studio, you know. So I think it's a little bit of both, or Terminal 5, to keep it short. Yeah, I mean, the movie started from my incapacity to articulate my freedom. That's where it started, you know, which is kind of weird because it's like super abstract. You're like, what does that mean? But I really was trying to understand, you know, I thought about, let's say, you know, after the Haitian Revolution, and you have a bunch of slaves, and now we're like, okay, you can do whatever we want now, we're free, you know. But we're not free, right? So now the challenge is like, what do you do with that, and how do you create a community and nurture a community within that context? And also, freedom doesn't mean the same thing for everybody, right? And the idea of these guys needing each other, but at the same time being aggressive with each other because they're not at the same place, for me was like a way to talk about how complex it is to find your place, how complex it is to create a sense of freedom, not just for you, but for everybody around you. And by freedom, just to clarify, is the capacity to find peace. It's the capacity to find balance within yourself. It's the capacity to keep and nurture your agency over yourself, over your life. To also cultivate a sense of dignity. So all of that for me was like in the air, and I wanted to find a metaphor to address that in a way that is not resolved, because this movie has 20 interpretations if we're 20 people, you know. And I've been challenged a lot by feminists, you know, why is the woman not part of the throwing, you know? If it's a slave context, then it's wrong historically, because woman was in the house and also sometimes in the field, you know. So why is, you know? And thankfully, I let everything in, and I learned to grow in the process. So this movie and what I'm learning from it, conceptually and emotionally, is shaping the next movie, and that's how I like to work. You know, the idea is to grow in the process, because my work is a way of thinking. I use it as a way of thinking. And if you're really thinking, then you evolve. Because things, you know, get scattered, things get hard or easy, but you're continuously trying to find answers. So this movie came from that. It started with this idea. And then I started crafting it. But I've never done a movie before. I mean, I've tried, but this is like the first professional movie I've ever done. So I had to get a team together and try to tell them the story. And then they were like, you need to write something. You can't just tell everybody the story on set. Everybody needs to know what they're doing before they get to the set. So I started writing, you know, and then one thing led to another. And the movie was done, you know, which is a lot like I work. There's a lot of things that I'm doing for the first time, like this week, you know. I think it didn't matter. I think it wasn't about the thinking more than the doing, you know. Because it's only after I started painting, I was 15 years old, you know, and that idea of the use of the language I told you about started making sense. I was 29, you know what I mean, 28, and I had to be hit really hard in the head, you know what I mean, to actually be like, whoa, I'm just wasting this energy right now, you know. I'm not encouraging nobody to do that, because it was hell to this day. But what I'm saying is that everybody has their own time, right? I'm just saying that there's a moment in the process you will have to take decisions for you and for your work, and I hope you choose what is necessary for you more than a context or whatever, you know, because that's going to be the core of your longevity if you ever decide to make a living out of it. Or not even make a living, but to live doing it. Because that's actually how you might make a living out of it. You see what I mean? think in the process of working with history in general, and I'm talking for myself, when you're using history as a mattress, you automatically decide what you want to reveal or not, you know? Or if not revelation, at least what you want to play with, what you want to use, you know? And it can be hidden by the fabric or by certain concepts or by the abstraction itself, you know? Because Numa, the guy that was executed, if you don't know it's Numa, you might not connect the dots that it's a body. You know what I mean? And I'm not hiding, actually. I'm making you rethink what happened, making you rethink about that it's a body, you know, or it could be a body, you know. In that constant state of revelation, and I think painting is that. What you describe in terms of revealing with the fabric, this is part of what painting actually is. Because with one or two brushstrokes, you can suggest a face. And with two more, you can just erase it, you know? And it's about the balance, you know, what is important for you to reveal or not. For me in that painting, it was the position, it was the weight of the body that got me, you know, as if he was still alive. Then that for me was like, whoa, this is interesting. And I think also when I'm working with history in historical context, it's important for me to be here, to talk about it, to contextualize it. You know, it's like an extension of the work because it's my country. It's my generation. I mean, I'm financing a documentary about corruption and impunity right now. Because that's also how I want to be present, you know, and that talks about revelation also to a certain extent, because there's a cost to revealing things. And I always said to myself, after the show at Goldsmiths, which was called One Future, and what I did in that show, I put a big, actually maybe I can find it on my computer. It's called One Future. I put a picture, I put a picture of the autopsy of Kennedy in the space, and next to it, I put the execution of what's his name, of Jacques-Stéphane Alexis in the space, you know, and in that space, that's the autopsy that I'm referring to. Oh, sorry. It's a really massive painting, and in that same space, it's always like that, right? When you're looking for something, you can't find it. I'll just show you a little bit, just so you understand. All right. This image is okay. This is the autopsy of Kennedy, and I wanted to connect Kennedy in that human barbarity, because atrocity is still atrocity. You know, it's not a matter of like because it happens to white people or black people or this or that. It's just human barbarity. I mean, the violence needs to stop, period. Not because you're in this country, that country, where you have this story. It just needs to stop for everybody. And I wanted to create, that's why I call it One Future, and I wanted to create this parallel between, this is Flowers, called 1963. It's the day that the dictatorship started, if I'm correct. It's Loops and Holes, it's called. Because loops and holes are the black notes in music. And I was referring to that, I love music, and I was referring to that in the black holes in history, you know, that we tend to forget, that are really important. And it's Loopholes, 1963, Loop and Holes, it's called. This small painting here, it's called Fall Dimanche, which is considered to be the Haitian Auschwitz in Haiti during the dictatorship. So I put this small painting right in front of Kennedy. you know? And Numa right next to it, next to Kennedy, you know? Why was I telling you that? I was just making a reference to something to get to something else. I forgot. Help me out, man. Help me out. Help me out. So these are just references to keep in mind when this is Fordinoche. In terms of what you decide to reveal and what not to reveal, you know, it's a choice in how you organize these chapters of history. That's what I wanted to say. I've worked on this. This is the first time I did the show. I've made 3 shows after that on the dictatorship. In every show I did, I was always asking myself, would I be able to do a show like that in Haiti? Could I bring this show in Haiti, knowing that when I was asking myself these questions, people who benefited from the dictatorship were still in power. And by in power, I'm not meaning they have money and guns. I mean, they're in the government. You know, like the Minister of Culture, you know, there's like, it's not just like a concept of they're still in power. These are questions you ask yourself when you're working on subjects like that. And in working on that also got me to work on the documentary, because I felt like making these works and talking about it wasn't enough, for me at least, you know. I wanted to, and by making the documentary, I'm not directing it, I'm producing it. I'm facilitating a director who's my age, my generation, to tell a story that must be told, you know. So the hiding and the revealing is something that you can do in many ways. It's your call. You can hide it with fabric, you can hide it with paint, you can hide it, or you can not hide it at all. You can read it, you can, you know, like thankfully, art today is not just about representation. You can incarnate things, you know, and as long as it means something to you, then it's worth trying. It's an interesting point, because the question goes down like this. If you were to paint love, would you tie it to a color? And if you use that color, would people say it's love? You know? I mean, I don't have the answer. It's not a trick question. I'm asking you, you know? I'm just saying that often it's not always the intention that you put into a work that it reflects. That's why it's hard. Because if it was the case, it's easy. I would just incarnate an emotion or a feeling, no matter how complex it is, and I would just take anything and just transfer it into an object. Just like Chris Albani suggested. But they got together, you know? They made a wish, you know, which is the most abstract thing you could do, right? And they put it into an object that has a spiritual value. And then they give it to a priest to nurture the passage, you know? But then we claim as artists we can do it in our studio on a Saturday evening. You know what I mean? And we're not wrong. I'm not saying that we're wrong. I'm just saying that, unfortunately, or fortunately, it's not a 1+1 thing, you know? And I didn't want to talk about the violence only visually, because there was the first painting I've done that I considered an abstract painting, it's called Loyalty, where I painted the burial of François Duvalier, where there's like a video where people are following his coffin in the city. And I like stopped the video and I painted it. It's called Loyalty. You know, while I was doing this, I was asking to this day, what is loyalty? What is painting loyalty? How do you paint loyalty? How do you decide what loyalty is? You know, I don't have the answer, but the process of trying and of using this language, trying to manifest that's why I'm an artist. That's exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing, because it's slippery, you know. And the loyalty, how do you talk about violence, people will argue how you can paint violence, because you can just open flesh. But when you're talking about vulnerability, when you're talking about loyalty, when you're talking about fear, when you're talking about love, when you're talking about things that are, and these emotions, they're like colors, you know. Colors never come alone. Like, you put the same blue next to a green, it's a different blue. You put the same blue next to a yellow, and it feels different already, you know. So it's a combination of these things that are just kind of merging into each other. So I didn't approach it as a color, you know. I approach it as, what are the elements that I want to talk about that matters to me? Fall Dimanche matters to me. You know, a place that killed thousands of people is on a small frame. You know, and this is one-on-one scale of a door. You know, that was a prison. So this black square, basically, people look at into that to see if there's dead people in there, they need to get out for the day. You know, it's a small piece. It doesn't have to scream the violence, I think. You know, and if we're not even talking about psychological violence, which is like another chapter in its own. How do you do that? How do you even start this conversation, you know? And make people connect to it, because it's not just doing it on your corner, but it's like, if you ever want to bring it into the world, how do you connect it with reality, you know? If you want to, because you don't have to. It's not a must. You don't have to show the work you do. You know, go to see selling it. This is like, we don't have to. This is nice. I'm getting warmed up. Bring the questions. This is fun. Well, that's a good one. I'm gonna try and translate that, all right? You help me, brother. If I'm going wrong. He's referring to what Chris Abani was talking in the beginning, how people get together and make a wish and put that wish into an object and give it to a priest, and then the priest do the necessary sacrifices. He was making a reference with artists. It was like, is there something missing? Is there the community? Is there a sense of community that's missing in the process of being an artist and being in your studio on your own and then of doing a piece? Is that okay? Yeah, the collectivity. Well, technically, what I'm doing here is close to that. Yeah, what's happening here is close to, except that it's not a work, it's a vision of the world, you know, that we're participating in right now, you know, and to stay practical outside of the concept of the vision, there's also the reference to when the work is exhibited also, it falls into the collective to a certain point, and then it feeds people, and the work gets fed also by the people, you know. So there is maybe the mechanism now is different, you know. Maybe the mechanism is different. And one thing that's important in what he said is a channeling. The role of the priest is to channel the energy to the object. And then the object becomes a kind of like receptacle of everybody's energy, because they still pray to that object. they direct their energy to that object, you know? And maybe we can question, maybe the art is the other way around. Maybe the art just gives back the energy, I don't know, you know? Reality is, finding the answer is not gonna bring peace, to me at least, you know? Because the work is a residue of places I've been in my head and thoughts I had, you know. So, but it's a good question. It makes me think of the comparison, you know. Do you have more questions? Bring it in. We can also talk later if you want. There's no, I'm not running away. So that's it? Or anything else? All right, thank you for everything.